Friends, this is the B-side for the Pale Wave song Black, where I'll be explaining why it made it onto this playlist. So, firstly, Ross talks a lot about giving credit for giving music and giving joy. And so, this is another song that I wanted to say who it was from. So, my old boss, Jilly, had a Pale Wave song in her playlist, one of their other songs, There's a Honey. And that ended up in my personal playlist. And I went and I found a bunch of other Pale Wave songs. And I would honestly say they're probably my favorite bands. So I talk a little more on it, I think, in when I annotate one star reviews of the Taj Mahal. But Pale Waves connects to a little bit of my own disappointment, specifically about capitalism. So I've never been to one of their concerts because they've never been in a place that was easy for me to access. Both times I could have gone. The date was a date I was free and I could afford to go, but I was disappointed that I didn't get to because it was in a place that I couldn't get to. And so my own expectations of attendance were challenged because I had the expectation that having the money to go meant that I would be able to. And then I'm not sure if I should include this because it might not be relevant, but I did want to share it anyway. Pale Waves, in a roundabout way, ties into something else I'm mourning right now. Last weekend, Jilly was in town, and I wanted to spend a little bit of time with her and get caught up. She didn't reach out or send a text to ask me to hang out with her, and so I didn't want to ask. And I had this idea in my head, or this expectation, because so much of this playlist, and I think mourning as a whole is about expectation, was that we would have Ross's idea of the hang. We'd sit down with each other, have a few drinks, and be able to pick up right where we left off. You know, she would tell me about life in Canada with her wife. I would tell her about how it felt to be close to graduating college. And, you know, maybe because she's the one who introduced us, Jilly would be able to tell me a little about this girl who I've been having a hard time with. And so I had this idea of a hang with her, in no small part because she's the one who gave me Pale Waves and some of the other songs on this playlist. When the song made it onto the playlist, one of my first thoughts was to wonder what it meant that the music I got from Jilly, who I am quite fond of, is all about mourning, or at least they're all things that remind me of mourning. Pale Waves is my favorite band, but a lot of their work is about mourning, and some of their songs like Easy or You Don't Own Me, they're good songs, but they don't make it onto a playlist like this. And if I were to make a playlist of my favorite Pale Wave songs, those songs that aren't about mourning wouldn't make it here. And so I was thinking about what that means. And so I thought about Dr. Winrock's class, specifically again when we talked about listening to sad songs on purpose to wreck our mood. And then I also went back to Ross and Jana's idea of wreckage and how it feels good to wreck things. It might feel good to mourn and a little cathartic. If I were more articulate, there's probably a whole essay on this next point to be written somewhere. But I was thinking about what it means for something to be about mourning and what it means when we assign meaning to things. One of the things we talked a lot about in Dr. Winrock's class was works we think of like as footnotes, and when information is redacted, we as a reader naturally want to fill in that redacted information, but are we doing a violence to the author who chose to redact it by trying to fill it in? And we talked in this class about how works that were thought to be about joy were often given a stigma and connotation as childish. And so I wonder then if we're doing a violence to a work by filling in what it's about without the author. You know, another Pale Waves example I have is one of their other songs is Kiss. And their lead singer, Heather Baron Gracie, has talked about it, and she called it a lighthearted and naive song that made people happy when they listened to it. But I've always thought about it as potentially connected to mourning also, because there's lines like "Kiss me hard, just like I'm breaking your heart," or "We don't know where heaven is." And to me, that's kind of about mourning. And so I thought, you know, am I doing a violence to her and to her band then by reading in mourning and adding it where she didn't intend for it to be? And also, do we do a violence when we relate to someone else's mourning, or at least pretend we can relate to someone else's mourning, or mourning that wasn't written for us? But anyway, it's very clear, again, at least to me, that Black is about mourning. Black are funeral colors, and Black as a song, it's very clear what it mourns, which is a relationship, right? She sings, "You don't love us anymore, but I do." So in my first MP, I touched on the idea of, what does it mean when you're the only one mourning? There's this moment in Inciting Joy when Ross talks about how we're all standing beside a grave and how mourning creates this communal space. It's very difficult work to mourn, and it's heavier though when you're the only one who mourns it. And I think Black is an exploration of that. And that's why Heather Baron Gracie sings, "You don't think we're worth it, but I do." She thinks this relationship, this mourning is worth it, but her partner doesn't. In the MP1, I also talked about what it means to mourn yourself. And to expand on that a little bit, because I didn't really in the MP1, we mourn ourselves all the time. If we've been injured or sick, we might mourn when we are healthy. If our personality has undergone a radical shift for some reason or another, we might miss the person we were back then. And as we come to transactional periods in our life, like graduating high school or college, or leaving a job or a relationship, you kind of mourn for that wide-eyed person you were when you started that didn't have a clue in the world what was coming next. And I think some of the mourning that Baron Gracie takes on in Black is about that process. She sings, "You're beginning to hate me and who I'm becoming lately." And she says, "I'm not changing, I'm just waiting to figure myself out," as she mourns. And then one final note here is a return to Barthes and the idea he says about trusting the banality inside of yourself. Pale Waves, as a criticism the band gets, they're criticized for not being lyrically creative and diverse. And I love the band, but it's hard for me to disagree. And I think a little bit that that's interesting, though, that we're supposed to be able to produce something unique and interesting even as we mourn. But aside from, the capitalist nature of that, which of course comes with the understanding that we can't put aside capitalism in our own lives like that, I think Pale Waves also surrender to the banality inside of them. Some of their lyrics really impress me, but a lot of this playlist is also about performance, and I wonder if Pale Waves, through songs like Black that aren't lyrically diverse, tackle this performance and kind of say, you don't have to find me lyrically creative. This is what mourning sounds like to me.